Hello, and welcome to the latest edition of the Weekly Brief. I am Robbie Feinberg. I'm Director of Communications and Government Relations for the Maine School Management Association. I am your regular advocate in Augusta for our public schools all across Maine. The Weekly Brief, as you likely know, is our regular look at what is going on in the Maine legislature and how it could affect Maine schools in the weeks and months and even years ahead. We're going to get going right away. We've got just a few updates for you this week, just on a few subjects. The governor's supplemental budget is out. We've got some updates on, what's being considered around the EPS funding formula. So we'll get into all of that, and I will quickly share my screen. Okay, so let's get underway. This is the weekly brief for February 6th, 2026 this week. And the biggest news that we had this week was really around the governor's supplemental budget proposal. And before going into what is in that proposal, I want to just give you some general background on what this is, how it works, and why it does get proposed every year or two. So during the second year of each legislature, our lawmakers, they are required to basically look at Maine's budget projections. And these are updated every few months, really, to look at what our revenues look like as a state, what our expenses look like as a state, how much money we're bringing in, and things like taxes. And then as a state, we are required to spend that money. We must have a balanced budget. So we're required to regularly update our budget. So even though in the last session of the legislature last year, there was a biennial 2-year budget that's passed, the budget still kind of needs to get updated for these latest projections. So this year we had a relatively rosy forecast as our latest supplemental or our latest budget projection. So forecasters are expecting about $250 million more in terms of additional state revenues for that biennium. And that means that the governor and the legislature are now tasked with determining how to spend that additional money. So there's about $250 million there, and the governor and the legislature will work on how to spend it. So this proposal, and what it really is, this is the governor's recommendations. So it's really just what Governor Mills is looking at and saying, this is how I am looking at how to spend this money, what I want to do with it. And then it will be really up to the legislature. So then the appropriations committee, other committees will look at this. They will say, we want to spend the money this way. We'd like to spend it that way. They will ultimately work out a spending plan from there. So now let's take a look at what is actually in the governor's proposal and what it could mean for schools. So the biggest piece of what is inside of here that we always want to highlight for schools is that this proposal does maintain 55% education funding. So there's about $46 million in additional funds in this proposal to ensure that the state continues to meet its 55% local education obligation. We know how important this is to really making sure that our districts are supported, that our local towns and municipalities do continue to be supported, that this doesn't fall on local property taxes, and we do have adequate support. We know that so many of your districts are still struggling with your local school budgets, expecting increases. So making sure that we at least have stability here is so important. So we are very thankful that this proposal does continue that education funding. It does provide that extra $46 million on top of what was passed last year to make sure that the state continues to meet that obligation. So we are very glad to see that that was included. Now, in terms of some other pieces that were included, so the governor's proposal does include increasing the state's minimum teacher salary, and that would go up to $50,000. This has been a major priority for many lawmakers for a few years, as we know, and this budget would include this. So the way that the budget proposal would work, it would increase the minimum teacher salary to $45,000 in the fall of 2027, then $47,500 the following fall, and then ultimately up to $50,000 by the fall of 2029. So clearly this would have, a significant effect on education. It would have quite an impact for educators and for schools, particularly, I think we know in kind of many many more of our rural areas, which aren't already at that 50,000 number. We know that a lot of our schools, specifically in the southern part of the state and larger areas, are likely already at this number, but this would affect, many of the other smaller or more rural schools when it comes to this. So that this was included, and we know that this has been a priority of legislators as well. So we'll be watching this very closely. But this ultimately did make it into the governor's proposal. She'll be recommending this for the next few years. Now, we also wanted to highlight a few other pieces. So, this is something we've talked a little bit about, but school bus safety. This is something that the governor's office has been talking about quite a bit. And this proposal would really work towards safety and retrofitting of our school buses. So, this proposal would allocate about $6 million. This would actually come from the state's rainy day fund. And what this would do is that it would pay to retrofit all Maine school buses that do not have two specific functions. So one is school bus crossing arms and anti-pinch door sensors. Those are the two big areas that the governor does want to focus on in terms of retrofitting. This has been obviously a high, a very prominent topic of conversation in recent months, particularly after those tragic deaths of two Maine students that we did see in two Maine communities in recent months. So this is a major priority here, and this would have the state pay for the retrofitting of all Maine school buses that are not at that standard, that do not have crossing arms and those anti-pinch door sensors already. So our organization, the Superintendent's Association, is currently working with the Transportation Committee actually to try to approximate really the full cost and the breadth of these requirements, what would go into it, working to get kind of a full accounting. But we are very glad to see that the state is really working to support our schools on this effort and say that they believe in these requirements. They believe in the safety, as do we. We certainly believe that all of our school buses should be as safe as possible. And we're really encouraged that the governor is working to put some money aside in order to help our schools and local communities with this sort of requirement and with this retrofitting. And now the last piece that we did want to highlight as well is that there's actually $500,000 in this budget proposal, the supplemental budget proposal as well, around AI. And so what this would do is that it would actually expand the DOE's guidance toolkit that it has around AI and would provide grants to local school units, to nonprofits, to universities to work to provide professional development to educators related to the use of AI. This was actually a recommendation of the state's AI task force, which formed for about a year. And it's encouraging to see. I think many of our local school units would appreciate this level of professional development and help as they work towards these goals, and they work towards really integrating this sort of technology as well as proper skepticism of this sort of work, and really having responsible use of artificial intelligence. So as I mentioned, this was included in the state's AI task force, and this budget proposal would include about $500,000 to advance this sort of work. So those are the big initiatives there, but I do want to walk you through next steps. And what I really want to make sure, is highlighted here is that this proposal that did come out this week, this is just a proposal. It is not a final budget. So what is going to happen is that now, over the next few weeks, lawmakers will take the governor's recommendations and they will work to incorporate some of their own policy priorities. They will work to look at the governor's recommendations, say, we think this should stay in the budget. These maybe not stay in the supplemental budget, and they will look at their own priorities, and they will ultimately work to create a final supplemental budget. We expect this work will probably take several weeks, at least a few months. The legislative session is set to end in mid-April, so that leaves them with a little over a few months to make this work happen. We will obviously work to share details as they come in regarding this work, as we know that many of these initiatives obviously would have a large impact on Maine schools. So we will work to share any of this information with you moving ahead, and really work to stay in touch with you about these initiatives that would have a large effect on Maine schools. And before we go, we just wanted to give a brief few updates on some of the work that is happening around the EPS funding formula. This week, MEPRI did release some of their recommendations that they were asked to share with the legislature on some recommendations around updating the EPS funding formula, recommendations around the regional adjustment, around looking at each district's ability to pay and what factors go into determining that, looking at the adequacy of the formula and whether it is really adequately working on, really adequately judging the full cost of education right now, and then also some work on special education. So there is a whole lot that is in that report. I don't want to go fully into it right now because there's going to be a lot more work on this. You will be getting likely more information in the weeks and months ahead, and this did just come out. But if you want to read that full report, you can head right to the link on your screen right here. I am putting it with my cursor right here. You can see this is mepri.maine.edu, and you can find a link on that page for EPS funding study. And if you click on that, that will take you right to the latest report, handouts that MEPRI did share as well. And so there's plenty for you to read in regard to that if you want to catch up on what is being proposed. We will also attach a link to MEPRI did give a presentation to the Education Committee on this. We'll put a link to that in the comments. You'll also see a link that is right here in the video as well. So feel free to get caught up on that. And then we know that the legislature will be really taking up this issue, working to, probably turn this into some sort of legislation in the weeks ahead. So a lot of work is ahead on this particular issue, but feel free to kind of read these resources that we're offering here for you to be able to catch up on the latest on that. And you can just also check out some resources from ourselves. Here's our legislative advocacy page. You can keep track of bills. We have our priority education bill page here. You can see a link to that as well. We hope that these will be very helpful for you in the weeks ahead to stay on track of everything that is going on in the legislature and being able to, really keep your other administrators, school board members, communities really informed about all of these important bills. So the links are right here. And that is all that we have for this week. We know that there are going to be some big public hearings coming up, so you'll likely be hearing from me relatively soon. We're expecting in the next few weeks, we're especially expecting a public hearing around teacher certification, which will likely be coming up in the next few weeks. So we'll be sharing more details on that because that could have a large effect on many districts across the state. But for now, just want to say thank you. Thank you for all of your own hard work, and we will talk to you soon.